I'm going to talk about something a little different today. I was kind of debating whether to ever talk about this, but this channel that I have here is actually, it's kind of for the purpose of saying things that I just want to be able to say out there into the universe, whether, now I've got two of you that watch, which is great. Actually, I kind of like it being small because there's things I'd like to say that I won't say on my main channel. So, I wanted to talk about the power of intention and your words. Uh, Your words have the power to bring blessing and cursing, right? Everybody kind of has heard that before. And I want to tell you a little story. It's a real story, too. I'm going to turn the camera around and show you the subject matter of the story. Okay. This is just to kind of say, like, not like to say I have special powers, but to say you guys have special powers. You're humans. You're made in the image of God, and this is and you have being made in the image of God means you have the ability to speak things into existence. By the way, these dogs like to eat carrots. They love carrots. So this little guy right here, this little gal, Grokey, maybe like 2 months ago or so, she was just being a terrorist, because she's a puppy, and they do that. They terrorize. She's so cute, and she was just terrorizing, and just kind of, how like you're kind of messing around and stuff. And I used to be in an evangelical church, so sometimes I joke around and I'll like lay hands on my kids and go like, loose them, like, the prayers you do in church and stuff. I was joking around, and she was acting up and kind of terrorizing. And so put a hand on her forehead, and I was like, whatever is foul in this dog, you are commanded to come out. And no joke, this is a real thing. About maybe like, it was the same day, it was several hours later, I went to go pick my sons up, and I brought them home. And, I didn't think anything of the prayer because I was really just, I meant to have said it, but I was really just, mainly just joking around, but I meant it. So if that makes sense. You know how when you mean something, you're just being a little dramatic or whatever. And so I had said, said, whatever's bad in this dog come out, because she was terrorizing, causing all kinds of mischief that was beyond the norm, at least, and it was just a lot. So a few hours later, I pick my sons up, I bring them home, and this dog starts pooping out worms, and I mean piles and piles of worms, roundworms. And I had to look it up on the internet because I was like, what are these? Because they were like curled up spaghetti noodles. But the weirdest thing is, and the boys saw this, and my oldest son is extremely scientific. He does not believe anything that he can't see himself or prove scientifically. And we were looking at the worms, and I said, something's really weird about these worms. They came out of her dried up, okay, crispy and dried up. So it was the strangest thing, because usually she wasn't given any dewormer, nothing. And the only thing I can say is that I prayed over her, but I wasn't thinking that it was going to do anything, And sure enough, she poops out all these roundworms, and they're already dead. And they're not only already dead, which shouldn't have been able to happen, because if they're being pooped out, usually they're stunned or something, and they're still moving, and they're in wet poop, so they should have been alive. They weren't. They were just, her fur is changing, by the way. That's why it's got these weird patterns on it. She's got this under fur, which is kind of like a sheep wool, and she's got this nice sleek fur that's coming in. Anyway, so she, let me flip this around. So she then goes on, and for the next 24 hours, that dog pooped. So many worms and worms and worms and worms came out of her. And I didn't even know she had worms, because we only brought her home maybe like a month before. And when we brought her home, the lady that we bought her from, she had actually already dewormed the dog. And I watched her do it. So the dog had to have acquired worms again sometime in that, maybe it was 2 to 4 weeks. It was in that range, and had to have acquired worms, which isn't surprising because she was going under the deck. There's raccoon poop under there and all kinds of stuff. But so I couldn't believe it, though. For 24 hours, that dog pooped out dead roundworms. Tons of them. And, she had been acting really naughty, like beyond naughty, and she's a brilliantly smart dog. And so she was getting into mischief that only a brilliant dog could really get into, stuff that was like, it was human in its mischievous nature. It was like something that like a 6-year-old or a 7-year-old kid would do. And the strangest thing is she had this smell in her fur before that. And I kept telling my son she smelled like a ferret or some kind of wild animal to me. I couldn't place the smell. After she pooped out all the worms, the smell left her. And she became, you know, still a puppy. They still play. They still get into little mischief. But she became this really, like, her temperament changed. And I started looking up, you know, because I know that your gut can actually, your gut is like your second mind. And you produce like something like 80% of the serotonin that's used in your brain is produced in your gut, of all things, right? So I was like, well, parasites change your gut bacteria. And they've proven in studies that if they've done studies where they had like these little Swiss mice that were, you know, like gentle and sweet mice that they don't really like. The Swiss mice are gentle. They're not like aggressive mice. And they took another breed of mouse that was aggressive, and they took the gut bacteria from the aggressive mouse and they gave it to they put it in the intestines of the little Swiss mice that were, you know, sweet and gentle. And the Swiss mice became aggressive from the gut bacteria, having their gut bacteria replaced with the gut bacteria of aggressive mice. It was very interesting. And then apparently the mice, eventually the aggressive gut bacteria wore off and they went back to their own natural gut bacteria. And the Swiss mice went back to normal. But I was like, wow, you know, the bacteria in your gut affect how your brain works and the chemistry in your brain and all of that. Because a lot of your neurotransmitters are actually produced in your gut. And believe it or not, your gut communicates with your brain more than your brain communicates with your gut. So your gut picks up on instinctive cues, things that are biologically coded, right? Like when you meet other people and you pick up on things and you get that gut feeling, you know what I'm talking about? That's how we're made. And so there's a nerve in your gut called the vagus, and it communicates with your brain and sends messages to your brain that tell your brain how to balance itself and, you know, actually communicate more with your brain than your brain communicates with your gut. So I was thinking about it, and I was talking to my son, the real scientific one, and I was like, you know, he was mystified, you know, because he saw the worm thing, and he's seen a couple of other things that have happened by intention that I'll tell you guys sometime, but I'm only telling you this because you have it too, because you're created in God's image. The power of your intentions and your words, having blessing and cursing. So we were talking about how the dog's temperament changed after she pooped out all those worms. I mean, she became like much happier. She had these weird behaviors she was doing that were pretty gross that she just stopped, right? So my son and I are talking about, you know, the possible gut bacteria connection, how the parasites in her gut must have been altering her brain chemistry. And we figured that might be it, you know. And actually I'm pretty convinced, because the smell that she had before she, you know, magically got dewormed went away when the worms were gone. That weird smell she had been having in her fur that nobody could smell but me. But I could, you know, women, we smell stuff, you know. I can sometimes, if you've ever been in a hospice ward, you can smell what cancer smells like even. But so anyways, my son then is talking to me about this, and he's like, you know, there's actually parasites that ants get that are small enough for ants to get. And when an ant gets infected with a specific parasite, the ant gets driven to start doing abnormal behaviors. Like it'll climb to the tallest blade of grass, right? And it'll do things that the parasite actually wants to do so that it can spread. And it will influence the behavior of the ant by changing, once again, the brain chemistry, and it causes the animal to want what the parasite wants. Like the parasite wants to spread, and apparently these parasites that get in the ants infect sheep, right? So when the ant goes to the tallest blade of grass in these pastures, it has a better chance of spreading it to the sheep somehow. So it made me think about the gut bacteria too, and how you really want to make sure your gut bacteria is healthy. If you have any stomach pain, don't, you know, ignore that. A lot of times meditation, detoxing from the stress and everything will... They're so cute. Hold on. There they go. Those dogs. Gracie's really good. Her real name is Gracie, but we call her Grokey and Grakie. I kind of like it. But she's really good at leaping and bounding. And Bunny's so gentle with her. she's on the fun path here. And it's an interesting thing because the way that God created Adam initially was, you know how in the beginning of Genesis, and this relates to what I'm saying, it talks about how God created he, she, them, and they were Adam. They, both of them. Well, the story behind that is that on the front, Adam was a man. And on the back of his head, this is the Jewish stuff, right? But I believe this, that it was a female face. And the Eve was actually on the back, and they shared the same brain. Kind of like we have the two hemispheres that actually operate separately. And the story is that when Adam went into sleep, and it says that God took Eve out of his rib, it doesn't mean like just out of his bone. It means, it literally translates as a side of Adam. So Adam was separated into two beings, right? But that God initially, one God, is both male and female, in the same way that Adam is. The Shekinah glory, the female part of God, is hidden, right? In the back, which is where it's safer, you know. God keeps the Shekinah glory safe, you know. That's the female aspect of God. And in the front, God is, you know, the part that we initially see and interact with is male. But God is both, right? So one God, both male and female in one. That's why I don't really like calling God a he. I do it for convenience, but in reality, God is not just a he. And so, in this way, when Adam was made in God's image, just like God could breathe breath into Adam and cause him to become a living soul, we, by our words, with our breath, create life, right? And it's real. It's real. And we all have it. We're all created in the image of God. It's not just like some special thing that I have. I've begun at home, not in public, with my younger son, because he's really interested in this. Like, I talk to the bugs, right? And this is a really funny story. And my son's done it now too, so he knows. And I have these little ants that come in, and they have this, they're called odorous ants, and they have a smell. They don't bite, and they're not bad. And they used to raid this bar, this little standing island bar I have in my kitchen. Let me hold this up. And they would just raid it. They'd just be all over and swarming it. And so one day, once again, like with the dog, I wasn't thinking about it. And I set my coffee cup down, and the ants had started to climb up it like they normally did. And I said, can you please not climb up my cup? And this is gonna sound crazy, but it's true. The ants went back down, and they left the counter, and they didn't invade that counter. And this is during the spring, for like over a month. And my sons saw it too, and they were like, the ants didn't come back. They stopped swarming the counter. And I was like, you know, it's the strangest thing. I didn't rebuke them or anything. I just asked them to leave, but they actually did. And so recently the ants came back on the counter. And I had noticed this trick, and I don't know if they're responding to the sound waves or what, but they had started to come back on the counter, and I would go over to the counter, and I'd talk to them, and I'd go, please leave. And they all line up, and they leave. And maybe it's the sound waves. Who knows? But I told my younger son, and my older son heard me, and he was like, And I was like, it can't hurt, right? We're all interconnected. And so my son saw it, and then the other day, the ants had come back on the counter, and he was like, let me try. And I was like, yeah, go over there and ask him, talk to him. And he leaned over and he said, hey, can you, and sure enough, the ants that are just running in every direction, they line up into lines, and they file off the counter, and they just leave, right? I have no clue if it's the sound waves and it's coming from a direction, but, you know, who knows, right? The idea here is that, you know, when people say, like, we are God, it's yes, it's true, and it's also not true. Okay, so when I say it's true, it's because we are made out of God. Every single thing, including these dogs that are running around and having fun in the yard, are made out of a piece of God. For instance, the word for dog in Hebrew means all heart, right? When Adam saw the animals, he just was able to discern what they were about. And so he named a dog after a name that literally means all heart. And what is a dog? A dog is all heart. And that quality that dogs have, that love that they have, that is an aspect of God's heart, for reals, right? But God isn't just one big dog, right? A dog is a part of God, right? And God has a part of him in the dog, him, her. But God, of course, even bigger than the dog, more than the dog, right? So the dog is an aspect of God. Even the sun and the moon, they reflect God's glory. So they're also a part, or a reflection of God's nature. And we are too, but we're actually made in the image of God. And we have the ability to create, to speak things into existence, and to create with our words, right? So I wanted to share that with you guys because I've seen some things in my life that make me really believe that. I have a friend, in fact, that I'm going to see today. She's not shy about this, so I'm going to go ahead and tell you her name because she doesn't mind. I've already asked her about it years ago. But her name's Valerie, and like 12 years ago now. It's like back in 2000. You can see because here's my tattoo right here. This is how I remember the timing. This is my son who passed away, Jacob Brent Jeffries. So I always look at the date and I go, okay, 2005. That's about the time I met Valerie. And so that's like 13 years ago now. When I first met Valerie, I was walking to the bus stop, and I'm gonna get emotional. I was taking my son to kindergarten, my oldest son. Deep breath. And she was covered, like, she's covered in tattoos, right? But it wasn't just that. I mean, her clothes were kind of ripped and her hair was tangled. But Valerie's schizophrenic. And she was at the bus stop with her daughter, and she couldn't even, stand in one place. She was turning around in circles and talking to, things that we couldn't see clearly. And she was really broken. I mean, she was a diagnosed schizophrenic and she had bipolar, but she also was on drugs. The drugs were after the schizophrenia. And when I first saw her, she was a little bit smelly, and, once you get closer, and she was like one of those women you'd see on Hollywood Boulevard that is, schizophrenic and just, talking to themselves and shaking and twitching. And when I first saw her, I started to back up a little bit, like, oh, and I should know better, I mean, I should know better than to, get freaked out by it. And then I saw my other neighbor, Gina, this Catholic woman. When I stepped back, Gina walks straight up to her, and she's like, right in the middle of her talking to herself, and Gina starts talking to her, and I was like, I'm sorry, Lord, let me go talk to her. And that started like a year-long relationship that started about then. I mean, it's 12 years, 13 years now, but that next year, I started talking to Valerie, and then we became friends, and soon her daughter was taken by CPS, and her other two daughters too, but her kindergartner was the oldest. And so she wasn't at the bus stop anymore, so I would go check on her. And I didn't, tell her, like, you're going to hell, or any of that stuff, as a pastor's wife at the time. I didn't do that. In fact, I wasn't even in a hurry to get her in the church building because I didn't want people to treat her badly. And, you can't really predict how people are going to act. You look at how I acted. And so, so that whole next year, she's still doing drugs and stuff, but I come and check on her, and I visit her, and things are going on. She loses her kids, and, well, let me back up a little bit before she lost her kids. One day, this is actually the day that the relationship started, wasn't just that day when I first met her. About 2 or 3 weeks later, I was at the bus stop, and her daughter had gotten, so this is right after I met her. I was at the bus stop, and I see her, and her daughter gets on the bus, and we end up talking. And when the bus pulls off, she's walking back to her house, and I cross the street with her, and she's explaining to me, and, she can tell she's got bruises and stuff. She's been beat up by her boyfriend. And when she's talking to me, she starts to cry, and she curls up in like a little ball. And she kind of sinks down along this fence that she's behind her, and she sinks down like in a little fetal position. And I cannot explain this, but this is the closest to God I've ever felt in my life. I felt such intense, unconditional love for her. It was like nothing I've ever felt, and I was like, I can still see it in my mind's eye. It was like watching beams of like light or love, or however you want to imagine it, like the ones they show coming out of people in those like Last Supper photos, but it's coming in at her from every single direction, and I can feel this tremendous love that God has for her. And I guess I started crying, but she still remembers this day too, and she notes it as the exact moment that she understood God's love, not my love, but God's love. And I did too. It changed something inside of me. Then we became friends, right? And the next year I'd visit her and stuff. And, you know, she ended up having a really radical, what people call a conversion. She, to this day, okay, so 12 years ago now, so it was like a year after I first met her. You know, we'd go for walks, we'd talk and everything, and something happened, and Valerie started to get healed. I'm not kidding. This is a true thing. She has a YouTube channel where she gives you health tips and tells people how to cure cancer. And she has several patients. She's cured several people of cancer now. She's a healer. She got completely delivered of schizophrenia. Like, if you've ever seen the movie A Beautiful Mind, like that, only even more recovered than that professor was. She's brilliant too. She's absolutely brilliant. She got all of her kids back. She's married. She's been married for 12 years now. She got married like a year after I met her. They have 2 sons. She got all 3 of her daughters back. I used to think that maybe her daughters would never recover from the life they lived before because they were so little, you know. Her daughters are some of the most aware, loving, smart, wise. Not only are they not ill-affected by the life they had, they are better than most of these kids you ever see, better than most kids I've ever seen out there. They're 100%, 110%. Valerie, for 12 years, has been delivered from the schizophrenia and the bipolar. She heals other people of cancer. She started out healing her own dog after her mom had died from a disease that you know, it was a cancer, and that's how she got into learning all the remedies. And to say that is to say that we're not here just to, you know, people say you don't just live or die to yourself. You don't. The words you speak, you're created in God's image, just like the other people, and you yourself, you don't have to wait for somebody else to fix the world. You're exactly where you're at to fix your little corner of the world. And by fixing it, it doesn't mean to go in there and just change everything and tear it apart. It means just love it. Speak life. And that's the way we change the world. We don't wait for somebody else to do it. We do it in the way we interact with people. We do it day to day. The way we interact with all of life. And I think that was the message, okay? So, like, you know how people kind of bypass this part of the message with Jesus, but one of the messages that he had was that we were brethren, that we could do the same things that he could do, right? So this whole idea of worshiping him as being the separate deity, no, God is one. And of course, whoever he was, Yahshua, Jesus, you can feel the truth in your heart when you read some of those scriptures. There's other ones that there's scriptures in the New Testament, not in the words of Jesus so much, but in other parts of the New Testament that are just, they're not even, you can feel that too. It's not even right. But you can also prove it when you look up historically that it was changed. But when he said, like, he said, I call you brothers, right? That means that you could do all the things that he did. Each one of us. And that's kind of the idea, in my opinion. Everybody's waiting for the second coming, and I've really studied this from a lot of different perspectives. And there may be some special man who comes on the scene, I don't know, but I know that it says this in Zechariah, and it says this throughout the Old Testament, and even Jesus said it. It's a plurality. It's not one Messiah that's coming back. It's all the people who rise up, understand who they are in God, and understand who everybody else is, and start to do their job and love people and love this good earth that we've been given and love the creatures in it. Because if you think about it, it's not like it's just us humans either. God feeds all the birds and all the bugs and all the creatures of this whole earth every single day. Every single day. Literally, if you study Kabbalah, God breathed, he renews creation not just every morning, but every like 3 seconds, they believe, which I think is ironic because that's about how often we breathe and we're created in his image, right? So it's a breath of God, and he's constantly renewing. And you know, we think we've made mistakes or we've blown it or we've gone too far and we can't change, and that is the biggest lie. That's a lie. That's a lie. No. You know, even our mistakes, you know, what did Bob Ross call them? Happy accidents, right? Sometimes those are meant to be too. At any rate, take care.